Hey, welcome to session 2 of the Solitude practice.
Hopefully you made time this last week to practice solitude by starting your day with a few minutes in the quiet before God.
Now, you may have found your time in solitude to be full of joy and peace, or it may have been really, really hard. I get that. Solitude, it's the path to God in so many ways, but it's not always an easy path because not only do we face God, but we have to face ourselves as well. So, our theme for session 2 is an encounter with the self.
This week, we want to talk honestly about the challenges we face when we enter the quiet. Before we begin, let's debrief last week's exercise in triads. These will be groups of 3 or so people of the same gender, ideally the same 3 people that you were with last week.
Now, don't feel any pressure to fake it or to say you did the exercise if you didn't, or act like it was better than it really was. Be as vulnerable and as honest as possible. And be sure to create a space that's hospitable for each other to share openly. Don't judge or criticize or try to fix anyone else. Just listen to each other in love.
Yeah, so here are a few questions to get started.
Number 1, how did your practice of solitude go this week? Number 2, where did you experience resistance in solitude, either external resistance or internal resistance? And number 3, in what ways did you encounter God in solitude?
Go ahead and pause for a few minutes to discuss.
"21 days in an isolated cabin in a Pacific Northwest forest, all alone. No phone, no computer. You literally turn over your devices when you check in. No books. The Bible is allowed, but with a gentle warning not to use it as a distraction. No alcohol, no more than 1 cup of coffee a day. No exercise, nothing to discharge anxiety from your body. And no contact with the outside world. You pack in all of your own food. Your one point of human contact is the clinical psychologist and spiritual director who oversees the program. This program is over 50 years old, but it has no name, no website, it's all word of mouth. But a few of my friends have been through this program and said it was one of the most transformative experiences of their life. So on a sabbatical, I went ahead and did it. Now, in all honesty, I thought I would crush it. I mean, I'm an introvert, I love to be in the quiet, and I have a lot of solitude in my rule of life. I thought it would be easy. It was one of the most harrowing, difficult, emotionally painful things I have ever done. I realized I had developed a way of being in solitude with props, a stack of books to read, my laptop to do a little writing and calendar planning. This was my first time going into solitude with nothing to distract me from the reality of my life. I asked the director of the program, "Why no books?" And he said, "This program was designed to recreate the experience of Jesus in the desert, or Elijah in the desert, or Moses in the desert." And then he said, "The desert teaches by taking away." I'm used to learning by addition, by hearing a teaching or listening to a podcast or reading a book, by adding new information. But the desert teaches by subtraction, by taking away all our props and leaving our soul naked, exposed, and raw. Until you go into the desert, you don't truly know what's in you. Now, 21 days was a one-time event. I don't plan on doing that ever again. But whether your time in solitude is 21 days in the wild or 21 minutes with a cup of tea on your couch, the point is the same. You have to face yourself. Henry Nouwen, in his book, The Way of the Heart, writes, "Solitude is not a private therapeutic place. Rather, it is the place of conversion. the place where the old self dies and the new self is born, the place where the emergence of the new man and the new woman occurs. In solitude, I get rid of my scaffolding. I have no friends to talk with, no telephone calls to make, no meetings to attend, no music to entertain, no books to distract, just me, naked, vulnerable, weak, sinful, deprived, broken, nothing. It is this nothingness that I have to face in my solitude. A nothingness so dreadful that everything in me wants to run to my friends, my work, my distractions. Solitude is the furnace of transformation, the place of the great struggle and the great encounter. The struggle against the compulsions of the false self and the encounter with the loving God who offers himself as the substance of the new self. Notice that for Nouwen, solitude is not a kind of day spa for the soul. Rather, it is what he called the place of encounter. Over the next 3 sessions, the plan is to cover the 3 primary encounters we must face in solitude: an encounter with ourself, an encounter with our enemy, and an encounter with our God. First up, an encounter with ourself. When you go into solitude, rather than feeling happy or at peace, the first thing that often happens is what Father Thomas Keating called the unloading of the unconscious, which is a way of saying whatever is down in you comes up from the substrata to the surface of your heart, and you begin to feel. Let me name a few of the most common feelings that come up in solitude. First, exhaustion. Often the first thing we feel is just tired. I call it the crash. It's like our body has been running on adrenaline and all of a sudden it just goes out. We feel a bone-deep weariness. I think of the story of Elijah in 1 Kings 19. When he goes into the eremos, he's so exhausted that all he can do for the first 3 days is sleep, eat, and drink, nothing more. That's often all you can do at first, rest. Rest is an essential component to discipleship to Jesus. Imagine your tiredness on a spectrum. On one side is good tired, the feeling at the end of a long week where you made the world a better place, you gave your life away, and you're ready to Sabbath and rest. Then there's unhealthy tired, where you're not sleeping enough, you're low on margin, high on stress. It's manageable, but you're on edge. Then there's dangerous tired, where you've lost touch with your soul and your God, and you're easy prey for temptation. Where would you plot your soul right here and now on that spectrum of good tired to dangerous tired? If you're in good tired, rest can keep you healthy. If you're in unhealthy tired, rest can get you back to healthy. And if you're in dangerous tired, rest can expose your need for serious change. But often in solitude, you feel tired. Another feeling that comes up in solitude is fear. Often I go in expecting peace and tranquility, but instead my mind can't stop racing and I find myself less praying and more worrying in God's general direction. I'm trying to focus on God genuinely, but my mind is a ping pong ball just jumping from what if to what if to what if. In solitude, all our fears come up. Third, sadness. Underneath everything in this life is a kind of sadness. Even our happiest moments, a wedding or graduation or the birth of a child, all come tinged with a faint note of sorrow. Sorrow and joy intermix in this life while we wait for Jesus' return. And when you go into solitude, often you begin to feel sadness well up inside you. It's like your soul tells you what you need to grieve, to sit in before God and let pass through you. The upside is it's almost like your body has happiness antibodies. When you let yourself really feel your sadness, often it gives way to joy, but it takes time. Another emotion we often feel is anger. All the contemplatives write about this, about how in quiet prayer, one of the major challenges we face is anger. All your hurts come up, all the people you feel have wounded you or wronged you, and you feel mad or bitter. I'll occasionally find myself ruminating on how infuriated I am, or replaying the wrong done to me, or rehearsing a speech against my enemy. Anger comes up. And finally, shame. When we are stripped down, naked, exposed, who we really are comes through. With other people, we can perform, we can project an image, we can attempt to control other people's perception of us. We can even fool ourselves to an extent. We can hide. But in solitude, there's nowhere to hide. Who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is all laid bare before God. And we often feel a profound sense of just how broken and in need of salvation we are. One word for all of these feelings is pain. In solitude, we encounter our pain. The existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard said there are two types of people in the world: those who are in despair and know it, and those who are in despair and don't know it. Inside all of us is a deep well of pain. No matter how sunny your disposition or robust your faith, we all have pain we carry in our body. And when we go into solitude, what is down comes up. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why in the world would I ever go into solitude? This is like the opposite of a sales pitch. Why? Because all of this stuff is in you. It's leaking out of you like toxic pollution to the people closest to you, the people you most love. To get free of our pain, we have to face our pain. The problem is, our culture has become incredibly sophisticated at not feeling any pain. Not just physical pain, but emotional pain as well. Primarily through the medium of distraction. 1,000 different cultural narcotics offer us a quick way to anesthetize emotional pain with our distraction of choice. Food, alcohol, work, church, shopping, travel, entertainment, social media, the internet, porn, and more. The smartphone is most people's portable coping mechanism of choice. I read one article in a medical journal entitled "The Smartphone as a Pacifier" that argued adults use smartphones the way toddlers use pacifiers, as an emotional crutch to distract them from painful feelings. But as long as you use a pacifier, you never grow up. And not only are we Christians prone to the same myriad of distractions as everyone else, but we can easily use God as just another distraction from God and from our own pain. The psychologist John Welwood calls this spiritual bypassing, which he defined as a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. An entire cottage industry, outside and inside the church, has grown up around staying positive. That's not all bad, but so few people are telling the truth. Life is deeply beautiful, but it's also full of pain. We must learn to face our pain. How do we do this? As always, we apprentice under Jesus and follow him to Gethsemane. Turn in your Bibles to Matthew 26. The story we are about to read takes place just a few hours before Jesus' betrayal, arrest, illegal trial, torture, and murder. Jesus knows what's coming, and we read this. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane. In Luke's version of the story, he writes, Jesus went out as usual, or that can be translated as was his custom, meaning it seems like Jesus had all sorts of hiding places around Israel where he would slip away to be alone. Gethsemane was one, a park just outside the city of Jerusalem. And he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Notice he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Not he began to feel happy and at peace. No, he began to touch his pain. And he was overwhelmed by it, quote, to the point of death. Do you ever feel that way? Like your pain is just too much to face. You'd rather die. He calls on his friends, "Stay here. I need you as my community." But then, going a little farther, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." Jesus goes to the place of pain. He doesn't distract himself from his pain. He meets God in his pain. How? He follows three movements of the soul. First, he gives God his feelings. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. He just tells the Father how he feels. No filter, no edit, just his raw, uncut self laid bare before God in lament. Then he gives God his desires. Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. The cup here is a metaphor for his coming suffering on the cross. Let the gravity of that prayer sink in. He's saying, please, Father, I don't want to go to the cross. Is there another way? Again, no filter. He's just offering his desires to God as they are. And finally, he gives God his trust. Yet not as I will, but as you will. He comes to the place of surrender. This is the pattern laid down by Jesus for his apprentices to follow. Go into solitude. Get away from the noise and distraction of ordinary life. Let yourself feel. Let whatever is in you come up. It may be joy or gratitude or exuberance even, or it may be exhaustion or fear or grief or doubt. Whatever it is, let yourself feel it. Don't run away to your distraction of choice. Stay with the pain. Follow it all the way down to God. Just this simple act of noticing and naming your emotions before God can do wonders for your soul. Psychologists talk a lot about how important it is not only to feel your feelings, for your body to process and discharge painful emotions, but also to name your feelings. Because when you name your feelings, one, you realize you are not your feelings. Your feelings are a part of you, but not the whole. You get a little distance from them, and with it, freedom. And secondly, you realize you have a lot of feelings. You often feel anxiety, but also excitement, melancholy, but also joy. But for us as followers of Jesus, once we notice and name our inner life, which is a key task in the spiritual life and a key function of the practices to create space for this to happen. But once we notice and name, then we can offer our feelings up to God for our transformation. How? By following the same three movements as Jesus. First, we give God our feelings. We pray whatever is in us. As the saying goes, pray what you got. If you've got bitterness, pray that. Hurt, pray that. Worry, pray that. With no filter. I'm convinced that one of the reasons so many people find prayer boring is they don't really pray, they perform. They hold back from God all the ugly stuff. But prayer isn't a place to be good. It's a place to be real. Read the Psalms. 2/3 of the Psalms are what scholars call lament. Lament is different than complaining. Complaining is just griping about your life, and it tends to make a bad problem worse. Lament is complaining to God. It has a U shape to it. You go down into your pain, but then you offer it back up to God. We give God our feelings. Then we give God our desires. Our desires drive our feelings. We feel happy when we get what we want. We feel sad when we don't get what we want. We feel anxious when what we want might not happen. And we feel angry when anyone is standing in the way of what we want. It all comes back to desire. The problem is, many of our desires are complex and confused. We want to follow God's call in our life, but we don't want to go to the cross. We want to be holy, but we also want to sin. What do we do with our desires? We offer them to God. Same pattern, no filter, just God, here, I want, you fill in the blank. Whether that desire is good, bad, or straight up ugly, we just offer it over to God. And then we give God our trust. We surrender. We let go of the illusion of control, and it is an illusion. We give up trying to engineer our life to the perfect outcome. God, your will be done. And that moment of surrender, when you feel that little inner fulcrum point in your heart yield, from there, your emotions start to get healthy. You start to move through all the inner chaos and come to peace. This is the pattern. Go to the place of pain and meet God there. The great lie is that we heal by moving away from our pain, when in reality, we heal by moving toward it and meeting God and our community in it. But this means learning to face our pain. My wife, who is about as extroverted as they come, has come to love solitude. But I remember when we were younger, she would avoid solitude at all costs because she used to say to me, I don't want to look under the surface of my heart because I'm scared of what I'll find in my shadow. She's not all wrong. All sorts of teachers of spiritual formation, from Ruth Haley Barton to Pete and Gary Scazzaro and many others, have used the metaphor of an iceberg for the soul. Like an iceberg, most of our soul's life is below the surface. And there seems to be some dynamic to spiritual formation where if we're not willing to face what is below the surface, we never experience the depth of healing God has for us. The Christian psychologist Dr. Larry Crabb has this paradigm based on the iceberg analogy. Above the surface is what Crabb calls the managed life, where our focus is on living by a set of principles to be successful. Our driving question is, how do I look and feel good? But inevitably, we get hurt, betrayed, rejected, let down, and we slip down into what he calls the wounded life, where our driving question is now, what can I do to get back to looking and feeling good? But the invitation of Jesus is not to go up and out of our pain, but down and into it, to meet God there in what Crabb calls the formed life, where our question becomes, what is God doing through this and in me? That is the question of transformation. And if you are willing to go down and in rather than up and out, you'll discover a whole new level of peace. In closing, many people fear the quiet. They fear being alone. They are terrified of what's under the surface and what may come up in solitude. But to quote Jesus' often repeated command, do not be afraid. What you find waiting for you, deep in the dark of your soul, is love. The Jesus of the Trinity is there waiting to welcome you, love you, heal you, burn you clean, and set you free. In solitude, we experience being totally exposed, totally seen, totally known, and completely forgiven and accepted and loved by God just as we are. This is an experience few people ever realize is possible. So do not be afraid. Jesus is waiting for you in the quiet.
There's a lot to think about, so let's take some time to process the teaching together.
Circle up with your group and talk through the following 3 questions.
The first, have you ever encountered God in a specific area or moment of pain? What was that experience like? Second, what are the most common ways you distract yourself or allow yourself to be distracted from the pain in your life? And third, Jesus shows us how to give God our feelings, our desires, and our trust. Which of those do you have the hardest time giving to God? What's one step you could take to surrender that to Him?
Let's take a few moments for a conversation.
Hi, my name is Asha. When I think about solitude, the first time was miserable. I was very restless and maybe too anxious. And when I actually could use my legs to start walking, that's when my mind learned to be still. And I think then that was the beginning of my journey, is my legs had to do something. And then one thing led to another, and now I can sit still for extended periods, but I could not start that way. When I think about facing my pain, facing my anguish in solitude, it is very meaningful. Not because my pain or anguish goes away in an instant, because I don't feel alone. It's the place where I give my pain, my weakness, my anguish to God. My experiences are sometimes I get some comfort immediately, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it takes years. And in all the cases, I look at it as a journey. Sometimes when I face my pain, I actually just realize the mess I have created, and the pain is not external, it's ones that I have created. And then I sit in my mess. And it's kind of funny because I just sit in my mess with God, and then you have to decide what to do next, which is to start cleaning up the mess. But it's not judgmental. Like, as you go through it, you just look at it. And what I would summarize it by saying is, it does heal, but you have to go at God's pace, not the pace I want to go.
Now we've come to our practice for this coming week.
This week is very similar to last week. It's to begin your day with a few minutes of solitude with just one addition. This week, we're also calling you to an exercise of noticing and naming your emotions, and then praying Jesus' Gethsemane prayer.
Let us walk you through it. Number 1, find a quiet place in your home or in nature that's as distraction-free as possible. Make sure your phone is as far away as possible and you settle into a comfortable position.
Number 2, begin to take long, slow breaths. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. If you want, you can count up to 5 seconds on the inhale and then down 5 seconds on the exhale.
With each inhale, prayerfully welcome the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit into the deepest places within you. You may want to repeat a simple prayer like, "Come, Holy Spirit," or "Lord, have mercy on me," or just Jesus. Then begin to let yourself feel. Let whatever is in you come up. Just notice it. Don't fight or flee from it or feel guilty about it or judge it. Just notice. Let the feeling be. Then name the emotion and be as specific as possible.
We put a list of feeling words in your guide. Pull that out and circle maybe 3 or so feelings that put language to what you're experiencing in your body. Just sit in those feelings, sink into them. Normally, we want to turn away from them and run in the opposite direction, but instead, turn and face them like you would an ocean wave, and then let it wash over you and pass by you.
And then pray Jesus' Gethsemane prayer. Give God your feelings. Tell him what you're feeling with no filters. Give God your desires. Tell him what you really want. Give God your trust. Surrender your heart again to him, or as Jesus said it, your will be done.
Whenever you're done, close your time with a simple prayer of gratitude to God for his presence, his love, and his goodness in your life. That's it.
Our strong recommendation is that you do a version of this exercise every single day the coming week. But the exercise for noticing and naming your emotions may take a bit longer. You may want to save that for a place in your week where you have unhurried time to sit, be with God in prayer, like your Sabbath or a day off.
The reach exercise for this coming week is to go for a solitude walk in creation. Most of Jesus' solitude time was spent outdoors in the beauty of his Father's world, alone, but also surrounded by the quiet life of birds and animals and rivers and rocks and trees.
Try doing a solitary walk this week. Ideally somewhere beautiful if you have access to a state park or hiking trail. If not, just find a park near your house and be with God in creation.
For those of you following along with the recommended reading, this week we're reading in chapters 4 to 6 in The Invitation to Solitude and Silence by Ruth Haley Barton.
We're also listening to episode 2 of the Solitude series on the Rule of Life podcast by Practice in the Way. Finally, just a reminder that the reach exercise for our final week is to go on a retreat. If you've not yet found a place to go away, a retreat center or monastery or cabin or just hiking trail within driving distance, go ahead and make plans to do so. Again, we make recommendations and you make decisions, but we can't encourage you enough to find a place, ideally out in the country or somewhere quiet, and go on a retreat.
Now in closing, we offer you this blessing. May the peace of Christ be with you.